guys, this is Eric Weingauer with Weingauer Racing. Today's video is about two different heads that were tested at Bob's a couple weeks ago. One is 427 small block Chevy. They're both my port designs. One's a 232cc, one's 235cc. Let's get into this because this is some relatively cool stuff. Here are the two heads that got tested, and I'm going to show you the flow tests for these heads and also the dyno results with you as well. And we'll do the average powers and stuff as well. But they are a different design, which I'll kind of show you. There are spots that I'm leaving off because I don't want to give away some of the stuff that was done, because this did take a lot of money and time and research to make this happen. But I'll tell you some of them, show you some of the differences. So this first one, both of these are Pro Max castings. So, but they're a different design. This first one you can order from Pro Max or through me. I am a Pro Max dealer. This is the 235cc one. Pro Max back in 2023 contracted with me to design a port for this, and I ported one for them, and then they had it digitized, and that's their CNC program. It's not on their website, which I do find strange, but I have seen it at the trade show, and I'm kind of happy about that. But anyway, this is what was done. It is 235cc intake runner, and the chamber size varies, but as they are now, they're 67 cc's. It has a 210 intake valve and a 1600 exhaust valve. This is how it looks. The big thing I want you to pay attention on this is the vane, because the Pro Max heads are that they have, their Project X anyway, have the vane facing this way, much like AFRs. When I did the program, I left it just like that. I didn't alter that, I just left it like that. But I did think that's kind of a flow manipulation thing. So this plays a huge part as we get into it. Now here's the thing. This is probably the first set that was done. So I had dyno tested the Project X 215s. I then had ported these, sent them off. Pro Max sent me the very first set, and I dyno tested against the stock 215s. And I'm going to show you some of those results as well. Immediately after getting done, I was like, I wonder if I change this or this or this in the port, if it would be better. And that's what led to this one. So this 235 is offered through me and Pro Max. Both of us sell it. As a note though, this is the valve I give you. So Pro Max does a rev valve, which is fine. But if you notice, this one has a back cut on it. When you get them from Pro Max, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. That's why I charge more than Pro Max for that. But anyway, again, after doing the test on that, I said, I want to know if I'd change stuff. And this is probably the biggest thing. Two things, really. I changed the shape on the short side, because the shape I use on this one, which I will not show you because I spent too much time and effort to do this. The shape on this short side is not the same on that one. I changed it because I wanted to see it that one. But the other thing, and this part I will show you, has to do with this vane. You see how the vane is this way? I wonder if it's just a flow thing, which looks really good on a flow bench, but may not be actually making any more power. So I changed it to a vane like that. So this is the new one. So the vane's this way, as you could tell, much more straightened out. Could have I straightened it all the way? Maybe, but it's kind of tough just because of the way the material was. So I left it that way, and I changed the intake valve size. So this one, the port itself is 232 cc's. So it's 3 cc's smaller than this one. It's a 2125 intake valve. So it's got a bigger intake valve than the 235. The exhaust valve you have to shrink down because you're running a 2125 intake valve. So this has a 1.575 intake valve, or exhaust valve, just like my Dragon Slayers, compared to the 1.6 for this. So the chamber size, 67 cc's, exactly the same. If you're wondering about, well, that's great cc's and all, but what about minimum cross section? Both of them are about 2.5 on both of them. So the rest of it's in the port, something that was changed, which again, I'm not going to show you that part. As far as exhaust ports, I'll show you the flow numbers, but they're relatively close to the same, because after all, that's a different size valve. That's it. So let's just look at get the idea of the vane difference. By the way, look at the head. These both came off Bob's. I was hoping for seeing a dramatic change in the burn pattern or the flow. They're relatively close to the same. So let's pay attention to this one. You kind of tell, or even this one. Now look at that. They're relatively the same. Trust me, I studied this for like almost 40 minutes of wasted time. And yeah, they're virtually the same. But anyway, let's show you the flow numbers and dyno stuff that goes with it. This is the flow number, so we'll start there. This is the 235 and this is the 232. So right here is the final. And this one is the 232. So we're just going to compare them. And if you're a truck driver, I'll say this out loud, so hopefully you can hear it. If you're like, I can't see it on your screen, I don't know what to tell you. By the way, they're in the books. I don't know about the 232, but the 235 is definitely in my small block Chevy book. My cord keeps snagging the page. Okay, we'll look at 400. That's my most important one. The 235 is 252 CFM. The 232, the smaller one's 256. So relatively close. It's just a few CFM. At 500, though, this is a bigger difference. The 235 is 285 CFM versus the new version with the bigger valve is 294. So that's a pretty good gain. At 600, the 235 is 309 compared to 319 for the 232. So definitely improvement there. 700, we have 322 on the 235 versus 326. So yeah, it flows a little bit better, and then it drops off and comes back. This one ends up, the 235 ends up hitting 235. I'm going to pause for a second. I think FedEx is here. Now for the exhaust side. Now, keep in mind, remember, the 232 has a smaller exhaust valve. So the beginning lift numbers, they don't flow as well. I mean, just look at it. 235 at 200 is 109 compared to 100 for the 232. Smaller valve hurts it. But we'll focus on 400. 192 on the 235, 186. So it is off, but not like a ton, because you look at 214 versus a 213. So they're somewhat close. And peak 237 to 233 or 235, they're right there. They're close enough. So as far as flow wise, they're relatively close. I mean, there's some advantages maybe on the 232, but not like overwhelming. But the dyno does tell things a little differently, but not as much as I was hoping for. So here are the dyno numbers. If you made it this far in the video, I thought what I'd do is I'd tell you the engine specs. I actually did this first, and that's the reason why I deleted the video, because somehow this thing didn't record my sound. Anyway, here's the specs on the engine. It's a 427 small block Chevy, 125 bore, 4-inch stroke, about 10.3 compression ratio. It's got an Isky hydraulic roller camshaft in it, and it's a shelf cam. It's the OMG 79 cam, which is like 248 degrees on intake, 254 on exhaust, 109 lobe separation, and 640 lift with the 1.6 rockers. It also has a Trick Flow R intake that's been milled down. You'll hear more about that later in this video. And a 1050 4150 carburetor with annular boosters. Here's the power from the 235cc heads. These made 621 horsepower at 6,300 RPM. Yes, I round up. And made 584 foot-pounds of torque. But on average, between 3,000 and 6,800 RPM, it made 602 horsepower and 539 foot-pounds of torque. So not bad. It's very respectable. This is the power from the 232 head. It made 625 horsepower and did it at 6,500 RPM. 586 foot-pounds of torque. So differences of, it gained 4 horsepower peak, 2 foot-pounds of torque peak. Averages were 604 horsepower between 3,000 and 6,800 RPM and 541 foot-pounds of torque. So on average, it gained 2 horsepower and 2 foot-pounds of torque. So there's that. Here's what the graph looks like. You'll probably have to zoom in to see this, so do your best. Again, this would be hard to see, but that purple line is the 232. So you could see it's up at the lower, kind of matches in the center, and then it's virtually identical as you go up through the range, so that trades off and on, but close. So now that you saw the dyno numbers on Bob's 427, I want to tell you a lot of R&D went into the 235. So I actually tested it with a whole bunch of different heads and intakes. And some of this gives some insights to why there isn't as big of a change or difference in power as what I had hoped from the two. So bear with me as I try to explain this. So this is with the 235. This is not with the 232. So the very first test that was done with the 232, we wanted to compare it to the stock 215s to see if it made any more power. So this may have an influence in what you're thinking of why there wasn't a huger difference or why there wasn't a bigger one. So this was on the 406 dyno mule that I had. And this was just the 215 versus 235. Now the picture isn't colored, but don't worry. Wherever you see the lines are above, that's the 235. So this is the lower RPM at 4,000. The 235 is beating the 215 and also at the top. Now here's what's interesting. This is with the Victor Jr. intake, which is the same one we also used on the 406 at Bob's. It's magic. It's been great on everything. But if you notice, the differences really aren't that great. It's 5 horsepower and 0 foot-pounds of torque difference. But there's some differences at the top and at the bottom, which goes against conventional wisdom, because I've been saying this forever. Just because you hear it on the internet, velocity, 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 every time. And I mean, it's been almost uniform at this point now. And the lower RPMs between usually 3,000 to about 4,500, the bigger head does better. It's almost becoming so much so that I could say with almost certainty it's better. Now, if we went to a lower RPM, maybe it'd be different. But that range, something about it, the bigger head's better. So then it's a lot better here. So something to think about. However, if you notice, that's not much of a difference, right? It's only 5 horsepower, somewhat like what we had with the 232 versus 235. But we switched intakes. This is the difference when we switched to a heavily ported 2892 that we had at Bob's. Again, the bigger jump here, 235s. But the difference grows at the higher RPM. So with this intake, the difference between the two heads was 13 horsepower and 3 foot-pounds of torque. So the differences grow when you have better intakes on it. So if you got a crappy intake, it's kind of holding you back, you're not going to see the differences. And the final thing I want to show you, because this is the intake that we tested with it on Bob's. The intake that was tested on Bob's was a Trick Flow R that I owned because I had done this test. The very first time we put the 235s on, we put the Trick Flow R back on, and I was like, this does not line up well at all. The ports were, because it's not port matched, it's just high. Because the head's been milled, so the intake's sitting higher up on the heads and it's blocking the roof part. So let me just kind of give you an idea. So here's your port. The intake should be sitting, the top of the intake should be here, but instead it was way up here. So I could literally see the top of the head. Not a good. So what we did with that Trick Flow R is we milled 60 thousandths off each side. And what that does is it causes this to come down to meet the top of the port. It gained 15. Now it didn't do much of the lowers until about, looks like 5,000. From that point on, it gained. This is the intake that we use to test the 232 and 235s. This intake doesn't seem like it holds it back, but I thought I'd share that with you. It's an interesting thing, and that's why I used it at Bob's. So the differences between those heads, not as much as I'd hoped. People keep saying things online continuously, and every time I test it, there's a little nugget of truth to it, but more BS than there is truth. Because I used to hear velocity, 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 which is true, but not what you're thinking sometimes. That's why we test. So velocity is important. Don't think I'm not saying that. But so far, every time, it's not the lower RPMs. It seems like in the higher RPM is where the velocity makes a difference, not the lower, kind of opposite of what the internet says. The other thing the internet kept saying was a whole bunch of different things that just turn out not to be true, at least every time I test it. And I know I'm going to get some backlash even on this, even though I actually have results. So the other thing I kept hearing was shape. The shape is the most important. Shape is the most important. If it's not velocity, they're like shape. That shape that's in the 232 has a better velocity coefficient. So let me try to explain. If you take a probe, that's what I've got here, right here. This is a velocity probe. And I put it in the port, inevitably, and this happens with all heads. On the short side, typically you have faster speeds through here, slower speeds up here. The port design on that short side for that 232 is more uniform. In other words, if I went from the slowest speed here to the fastest speed here, the difference is less than it is on the 235. The shape seems like it's magic. Wasn't worth that much. So here's the catch though, and that's the same thing with velocity. It's not uniform. If the engine was turning more RPM or we had, making way more power, the differences between the shapes might have been there. But in this application and 650 so horsepower, doesn't seem like it's doing much. So something to keep in mind, but there's one more thing I want to show you, because this one, if you own the Pro Max heads, you need to know this. This is the last thing I want to leave you with, and this is somewhat important, so pay attention. If you're Jeff N. Gelder, I told you wrong. I just remembered wrong, so please bear with me. Watch this part, it's important. When I first got the Project X heads, the very first ones, I did much like Gerald Brand does and many of you do, is I put a spark plug in. And I screwed it all the way in and it looked like this. If you notice, I could see the threads. All right. Now, was it quite as bad? Well, my camera's having a hard time. There we go. Let me see if I can get there. Yep, there's the bad one. You can see the top thread completely. It wasn't quite as bad, maybe 20 thousandths less, because whenever it does the CNC stuff, it cleans this up, so it removes like 20 thou. But this is still obvious. It's obviously not right? I was like, ooh, I'm not liking that. Because, and I'm going to go with this, so bear with this. It's going to get a little tangent here. I had a guy comment, and trust me, it plays a part in this. I had a guy comment, and he said, I showed last Saturday's video, he's like, this head, right? And he was talking about this head. This head is trash, trash. Because you could see the threads right there. See how the spark plug is? You can see the threads. This one, by the way, is very similar because it's not all the way out. This covers up more and actually somewhat puts it in a better position. But anyway, he's like, that's trash. You know, Jim's Automotive, he cleaned those threads up. That's going to cause pre-ignition, which I've got to get into real quickly. These threads that you see right here, and I'm going to back out the spark plugs, you see them. Those threads in the aluminum are not going to cause detonation. You're like, It won't. Let's just do some science for you real quick. The hottest part of the chamber, what's the hottest part? The hottest spot in the chamber, because you say hot spots cause pre-ignition, which I agree. The hottest spot in the chamber is the spark plug, not the aluminum, period. It's the spark plug. You're like, let's just do some science. Aluminum transfers heat way better than steel, just the facts. There's water that actually runs underneath the chamber, so it's pulling heat out constantly. That aluminum will never get, the aluminum thread sticking out will never get to the temperature of that electrode ever. The electrode one is constantly being hit by the electricity from the spark, so it's causing it to stay warm. It only has that little band there to transfer the heat away, so it is the hottest. So if something causes pre-ignition, it's going to be the electrode, not the aluminum because I can promise you, this aluminum, even though it gets warm, it's transferring heat constantly, getting this away. Those threads are never going to get hot enough to ignite fuel. The electrode will, absolutely, because that's way hotter. Hitting with electricity, heating it up, can't transfer heat. It's steel, so it doesn't transfer as well. That will, that won't. Stop saying that stuff. However, this is a problem. Because in this case, if you look at it, you've got threads showing. So you do actually have 100% sharp threads and steel. So look at this. You got steel out there in the middle of heat. This will cause pre-ignition. More so even than the spark plug electrode, because that's a very sharp, fine point. It can definitely hold on to heat. It's steel. There's no water that's trying to cool it where it is. It's out there exposed, unlike this where there's water behind it. That will cause pre-ignition. So not ideal. And you're like, so what do you do? Here's what you need to know. The Promax heads, and even this is my DB head in case you're wondering, they come from a factory in China, a guy named Steven Sun, and they're made from him. The problem he has done, and it's not this part, it's not that we cut out too much of the chamber. That's incorrect. It's that he, when he machined this flat spot right here, sunk it too deep. So he cut this too deep, pushing the spark plug this way too much. No bueno, right? It does have a somewhat of advantage for some of you that have header clearance issues. You could do that. You can get a lesser reach spark plug, get it to where you need to be, and your headers will clear. So that's a benefit. Disadvantage, if you run a 3/4, you're going to have, that sticking out. How do you remedy it? And it's a $6 solution. It's this. This is the part number, Moroso 71910. These are indexing washers. So what you do And I'm going to pause for a second.
Audio might not be great for the rest of this. My mic died, so I had to retape this. But essentially what you do is you're just going to take this amount of washers you need. At least this is what I use. A silver, a copper looking one, and the gold looking one. You put them on the back, and it brings you to this spark plug location like that, which is where it should be. So now it's flush and everything's with it. And that's exactly what should happen. That's an easy fix. It's an easy remedy, and that's the way it is. $6, you got yourself fixed. Interestingly, because I don't just speculate, I actually test stuff. I wanted to see if having it like this versus not having the indexing washers made any difference in power. Because there's a little backup to this. Almost every time I've tested the projected tip spark plugs, which are what these are, versus the non-projected tip like this, almost every time the projected tip has done better. So one of the thoughts I had when I was dyno testing the Project X initially was, okay, let me just take out all the washers, because that'll bring that spark plug, just like what you saw, all the way out here. Maybe it'll make more power, right? Well, I tested it, and here's what happened. So before is what you saw just a little while ago to now. So initially, set up like this, on the 406 dyno mule, made 630 horsepower, 547 foot-pounds of torque. All I did was remove the washers. So I took those washers out and re-dynoed it. And it made 627 horsepower, 541 foot-pounds of torque. It lost 3 horsepower and 6 foot-pounds of torque with that spark plug further out. In other words, without the washers on, it brought it out and it lost power. You might say, well, that's detonation. This thing ran straight timing, 38 degrees from 38 degrees at 1,000 RPM, 38 degrees at 7,000 RPM. And on pump gas, 11, 3 to 1. No signs as far as detonation-wise, and I pulled off the heads enough to see something. Nope, that part, no. It just didn't make any more power. So maybe it was on the verge, but it wasn't happy. So this is the better option. Easy fix, easy thing to do. But again, these aluminum threads aren't going to cause detonation. Those exposed spark plug threads might, but not that. So something to keep in mind. Also, if it helps you think about it, and I know this because I've had so much heads come back. So I have heads come in for refresh and whatnot, and just different people sending in heads. And a clear, easy way to see is if there was detonation in the spark plug threads, what you should see is it burning out right through here. I don't see that. On nitrous stuff, heavy nitrous stuff, usually it burns on this side, because guess what's causing it? You're right, the electrode. It's lighting up over here and it burns that away. But it's not lighting up here. It doesn't. And here's something else to think about. You smooth those threads up right here, and I'm not knocking Jim's video. He's perfectly fine to do it. It's just a visual thing. It does nothing either way. But you make those threads perfect, right? You smooth all that out. You still have the sharp edge this entire way. It's there where the spark plug isn't. So unless you take a die grinder and you smooth all out, you still got it. But you know where I do see it? Typically, you'll see spots right where the seats meet, about here and here on wedge heads, where there's aluminum missing, because that's where detonation can happen, right here on the exhaust seat. Where they overlap is usually a sharp piece of metal. The valve's hitting that, causing a little spark, and it's also hot there on the exhaust side, and typically it'll burn right there and there. Those are signs. Never there. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, last thing I'll leave you with. I think I'm gonna get rid of these 235s. If you're interested, I'm gonna sell these for $2,100, just like they came off the dyno like this. Hydraulic roller setup, just the way we had. I think I'm done dyno testing with the 235s in general. I think I've done enough R&D for Pro Max with those anyway. On the 232 stuff, I've got one set that I'll let go for $2,300. I just got back. They have the bushings in the hole. I actually have 2 sets back, but I got to check that out. It looks kind of weird. Make sure that one's sealed. But anyway, I got another set of those. I'm letting those go. Just I'm trying to get out of it because both of those are the old design. Let me kind of show you. Same thing as this 232. So this is the exact same one, except for you notice I cut out this and I had to weld this up because it did get messed up in the CNC thing. That's perfectly sealed. But Terry Wilkes was nice enough to press these in. So this set's perfect. The other one's got like a little bulge here. I'm trying to check it, but this is perfectly sealed, but I'm letting this set go. Will be $2,300 set up for hydraulic roller. If you want solid roller, you can. It just costs more. The new design's a bit different. The pinch is a little bit bigger and different things. The valve job chamber is a little bit different as well. But anyway, these still got to be valve job milled, so it's not in the final configuration. But anyway, I'm just trying to get rid of some of these anyway, just because I want them gone to go just to the new style. This is the old one, which is the same thing that was used for that. So those are for sale, the 235. This is the 232. It's already sold. I got switch springs. I have 2 more sets of 232s. One I'm for sure selling for $2,300. The other one I may let go super cheap just because I need to make sure it seals and I don't want any problems. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I am no Superman. I did raise Superboy. I do not port cast iron heads. I do not respond to Facebook or Instagram messages. The best way to get a hold of me is my email, weingartnerracing@gmail.com. That's where you can ask any of the questions. Guys, thanks for watching. You guys take care.